Hello, guys. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'll be talking. We were talking before a little bit with the other speakers. There's a little bit of commonalities in some of our talks, and then some of the themes that other people spoke, I will dab on. I was just seeing the talk from Balgas now, and there is a little bit of what he believes that I also believe. Today, I'll be talking about some of the projects and some of the workflow that we do at Pentagon and some other personal projects as well. But before we go to the theme of the subject, I will talk a little bit, a little bit of like how did I get where I am now. I'm Brazilian. I was born in Brazil many years ago. I graduated in advertising. I also studied graphic design. Then I did an MA in graphic design in London. I went back to Brazil, working a bunch of companies, freelance for a while. Went back to London, and then went with money for 6 or so months. Started applying to a bunch of studios, like a bunch of studios, like 226 studios. I sent my portfolio before I got an interview with Pentagon. And then I got a job there, and I'm there since that time. So a little bit of what Pentagon is. Pentagon has 52 years now, is the world's largest independent design studio, and is owned. What it makes kind of unique is that it's owned by designers. It works in a structure of small teams that work with a creative director and their own designers. So it has this kind of unique position where we are set up as a small studio with the structure of a bigger studio around us that allows us to do work that has a lot of quality into it, that has the people working, managing the company. So we don't have shareholders to report or anything like that. It's very led by designers for the words, but also we take very seriously the quality of the work. So I know a lot of studios will do that, but I tend to see a very big difference in the work that's amazing from very small studios, from the work from big corporations, big design agencies that are a little bit more corporate, or a little bit lose the track of what is interesting in design. So that's advertising done. Let's go to the topic of our talk. We're going to be talking about workflow, and then by workflow, I mean I will be talking about the creative process, on finding ideas, embracing chaos, and in the end, I will talk a little bit about witchcraft for your creative process. And I can divide workflow into two parts if you break down the word. The first one is work, which I really like this talk from Ira Glass. He's a podcaster. He is the podcaster from This American Life. But a few years ago, before podcasts were even a thing, he had this speech that's called On Taste, where he speaks, was a Vimeo viral, and where he's speaking about the gap between our taste and when we enter university and we know what is good or what is not good, and the ability for us to produce work that we judge by ourselves good. And then he says that the only way to overcome that is by doing a lot of work. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be showing to you is the results of a lot of work put behind it, and of a lot of trial and error, and a lot of just doing stuff. And the part about flow is based on a researcher that did this amazing long research. He has several books on that, about this state of flow. It's a state where, he says, we feel so much involved in our projects that we tend to lose a little bit of the perspectives of time, and we tend to lose a bit of the self-well-being around us. And this state is achieved by a mix of challenge and a mix of trying to do something new that is challenging enough to not be too hard for you to give up. So there is this liminal nice spot where we are doing experimentations and we are creating things that feel slightly uncomfortable, slightly new, slightly challenging, that we try to aim in every kind of work that we do. If we start to doing always the same thing and always just repeating and repeating and repeating, we get bored very easily, and if it's too hard, we may give up because we feel that it's not good enough for us. So first project I'm going to be talking is Natural History Museum in London. We rebranded this last year. It was a project that took 2 years to be made, and was made by 2 agencies, Pentagon and Nomad, and by a bunch of designers. So part of what we do when we start a branding project is doing the strategy and the research about that. So the client had already a mission and vision position. The Natural History Museum goes back to Darwin. So even though everybody says that they are sustainable or like they're trying to be like doing this greenwashing, the Natural History Museum in London has millions of specimens and is really a champion of the natural world since 150 years. So they had this vision of building a future where both planets and people can thrive, and the mission from the museum was to create advocates for the planet. There was another agency that did the strategy behind that, which they came up with a kind of like a tagline that we didn't love. So we gave our own twist into that strategy, which was making the museum going through this changing attitude from this being this passive catalog where you have bazillions of specimens over there to become an inspiring catalyst. And why I'm talking about that? Because I was seeing some portfolio review, doing some portfolio review before, and a lot of the advice that I give to people is similar. If you are doing work, it needs to be conceptually strong before you try to do something nice. So everything that you do in a project, if it has a very good backbone, a very conceptual backbone that comes from research, that comes from insights, it will make everything fall into place later on easier. It will make your storytelling for your brand or for any project that you're putting, not just a brand, become like it's kind of like pulling this thread that will connect all the points together. So the idea from the catalyst was what was inspiring us to do. I'm not sure if you can see, but every folder here is a different designer or experiment. So we were working, even though Pentagon works in this small structure, like our team is like 9 people or so, because we were working in 2 studios, there was around 15 or 16 designs that touched this project in a way or the other. Every person has a folder more or less like that, with a bazillion files inside, and every file has several different experiments on it. And we talk a lot about AI and other digital technologies nowadays, but part of the tools that we can use as well, someone made a question about tools before, is analog tools. And the beauty of analog tools is that you can create aesthetics that are not possible in the computer or be inspired by that. Even though in this project we did a lot of experiments that were trying to look to different ways of producing things, we did not end up using analog solution in the end, but that experimentation was useful for our final solution. So one of the first sketches for what became the brand was this composition between the 3 letters that make the Natural History Museum, that NHM, where we were looking at it as a dandelion or like as a school of fish coming together and representing nature and togetherness, but also this explosion that comes from the catalyst that we were seeing in the previous examples in the analog world. So this was one of my first sketches that we started seeing, oh, this can become a route. I'm not going to enter like we did like I don't know, like 5 or 6 routes for this project that we present as fully fledged, but in the end, like there was many things that the project needed to resolve. And then they wanted somehow a symbol that expressed, that could be trademarked in different locations, like in China, in Japan. So it needed to be kind of like a symbol in the end. So I said before that this project took 2 years, and I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about timings in branding and other projects in general. It took 2 years first because there was a pitch, so there was a pitch done, there was a creative phase done, there was a time for them to decide, and then we started the project again, several routes. And after a route was chosen, we spent like 6 or 7 months refining it, seeing how it could flex through all the areas of the museum, from packaging, retail, websites, apps, trying to show how the brand could work in many different applications, for exhibitions, for permanent exhibitions, for new exhibitions, trying to see how it works in partnership with Harry Potter exhibitions. All these kind of things are part of the holistic view from branding. And when I say that you need some solid concept to anchor everything like that, is because if you don't have that solid concept, things start falling apart later. These identities start to shine when you put motion into it, and when we put those sound reactive elements that you saw, the monkey screaming and the whale. So that was the moment where we saw, wow, actually there is something good here. We find something that's interesting. And from that point, we went on to develop this system into 4 motion behaviors that are all inspired by nature. That's the ripple effect, which is about like the catalyst. There is the pulsate effect that's inspiring hearts. That's the growth that's inspiring in mitochondrial reproduction. And there is the orbit, which is inspiring the planets. So these 4 concepts, they somehow will appear in different places and in doing different things. Here are some examples of the sound reactive elements. So we wanted to show that this identity could work in both more extreme scenarios where you need to be very active to calmer ones as well. We also developed a proprietary tool, it's like this generator, what we call, for the client to be able to produce new assets, to produce motion directly from this tool, to produce vectors directly from this tool. There was a problem when we were doing the identity that every time that we changed the word that was written in these circles, we had to redo the whole kerning and the whole spacing, and it was just a fucking pain in the ass. So by developing the tool, even though it costs money for the client, in the long run, it saves a lot of time and a lot of effort. We also spend a lot of time, an awful amount of time in these color palettes in the site, because this color palette, although inspired by nature, it was very much color. Not every color goes together well with each other, so we developed specific sets of colors where each color could be used with certain others according to certain rules. And then we gave up to the client. We also gave them the option to ignore all of that. Like if you go in advanced mode, you can do whatever color you want. But at least here, in this way, we have this mix between being a useful tool for designers and for the organization, but also not creating a whole mess of elements. We also did their first campaign where the tool and the whole identity is made for motion, but it also works nicely in static applications where we're just not using even the logo here, it's just the super graphic that appears in the back of the dinosaur. So moving on, I think this is a thing that's said by John Bevins in this book from DNADs, which is about copywriting, where he says you can have bad ideas, but you cannot have good ideas. You find good ideas. And this is a belief that I do share, where most of the good work comes from having to find them in these states of flow that you are pursuing. When you are doing a lot of things and exploring and being creative with the work and being inquisitive, like having your own playground to play, eventually you will unblock your problem, you will find something interesting over there. I do not believe in the solution that comes from nowhere. I do not believe in a thing that you just have and is done. So it needs a lot of work to become something interesting. Second project, Nubank. Nubank is the world's biggest digital bank, and it's a Brazilian bank. And when they came to us, we did this project in partnership with Pentagon New York, so we had 2 creative directors at the time working together for this. We did a lot of strategic positionings for them, and one of these strategic positions was this idea of flow. That's where I learned about the concept of flow. They never bought any of the strategic positions that we were doing like as a tagline or something like that, but there was elements of different ones that we were using that end up being part of the brand. Nubank had this concept behind what they did that was about simplification, which was about fighting this absurd that are the normal banks in Brazil, that they are very archaic and you go to these revolving doors and it's very non-digital, non-friendly. And they were trying to fight this absurd. So they had this concept of trying to be very cheeky and very forward-facing and very friendly as well. While on the other side of what we were doing for this project is that they were about to IPO, they were about to open in the NASDAQ, so they needed to feel a little bit more professional than the previous logo. The logo that we end up doing is this one. We eliminate the word bank from it to allow them to grow to other things. It's quite simple. It's just an evolution of the logo that they had. But we worked a lot into expanding the assets that they did have, like the color purple. They were known by the color purple. We changed the tone a little bit, and we introduced new tones of purple to that. And we did a very big project with them to find colors that would complement that, and the styles of photography and other elements that would complement that identity. So just about colors, for example, it's not just one phase of the project that you would do research. So even though this is a specific element inside the identity, the colors, we did a lot of research in the colors from Latin America, the way that we use colors in Brazil or Mexico or Guatemala or whatever, Colombia, which is where the founder of the bank is from, is quite different from the way that London uses colors, or probably here, where it's more gray or more dark. So it's very, Latin society is quite like happy and mixing things in a different way. So we were trying again to create a system for them where you would have a big range of colors, but as you see in the middle, there is a set of rules that you could do, combine them in different ways that would not make just a carnival of colors. Yeah. We're also looking into the contextual use of colors. In this case, this is not the app that they end up doing. This was just a concept for the app, just to show how colors could play in depth. So you had the purple area for the graphs, and you have blue and red coral as the ways to create hierarchy. We also designed a lot of applications for them, from the digital ones to the cars and to other communication-based things. And then later in the end, they are developing the whole identity with their own in-housing and their own agency. So part of the process of branding is handing what you did with guidelines and with that, and then hoping for the best, hoping that the client will have good designers in-house and or good agencies, and that they will implement that correctly. So there is a little bit of like letting it go in the end, like letting the flow go. But from other applications that we did, one of the good uses of purple, for example, is when there is police operations in Brazil. So you see how the card works nicely next to guns and cell phones. Carrying on. This is my favorite project from Pentagon, actually. Is Sight and Sound is a magazine about cinema. It's very well known in the UK. And it was a little bit forgotten in time, in the 90s, I think. So when we get the project, the magazine looked like this. And we were looking to the archive from this magazine, and we found this amazing thing from the 70s, this beautiful masthead. And we were just thinking, like, how can you evolve and end up in that kind of crap? So we started by looking into this and saying, like, why don't you just bring it back to our times? And why don't we bring it back to now and look how it could be done nowadays in a different way that couldn't be done in the past? So the first thing we did was, of course, put that in motion. We also did fix the kernings and other elements from that time. And even though we found that in the past, we also were exploring other things. Even to, in a way, a lot of the time, you find something that you really like, but you still need to try other things to see, like, is it the really good solution? Is it the actual good solution? So by doing a lot of tests, you can say to the client and to yourself, like, actually, is the best solution because I try other things. It's not because red means love or whatever that you're using red. It's because you tried a lot of other things and then you figure out that that works. This is the first, we did the first 2 editions. This was the first one that was 4 covers from famous directors at the time, where they were asking and doing interviews from them about like how the future of cinema. During the creative process, we were really interested in this idea of like having this clapperboard masthead for the magazine. That came from clapperboards from Alfred Hitchcock, or also looking into the type from these old things. However, the editor of the magazine, he didn't want to lock the cover into this black thing and having to shrink the image to a square. So even though they liked that, eventually one day they may use that, and that system is inspired the inside of the magazine. For the cover, they went with something more free. The typography choice that we did, they were all based in that style. and the style for the layouts was all trying to make it as cinematic as possible, trying to get things from cinema, getting the contrast, getting the big and the small, and using this black and white in a very concise way at times, and then in other times breaking with colors. This is again some gifts from the process, trying different sections of the magazine and different layouts that could be done. We did like several of them, and then we designed the first 2 editions from the rebrand. Some spreads from that, the contrast, making big caps as huge as possible. A lot of inspiration from other designs that we like Matt Wiley, and magazines from the 70s, like Avant-Garde magazine and Nova magazine, that were exploratory about design at the time. The pages, like these colorful pages, they are inspired by screenplay pages, like from The Shining and other elements, and they also help to navigate the sections from the magazine. Second issue was about Wes Anderson, some other spreads. And this is the thing that I saw the other day, like Colin Farrell holding Sight and Sound in this new show called Sugar. So it was it's a fake cover, but still, they are trying to say that the character is old-fashioned because he still reads magazines, but I feel flattered anyway. Quick parenthesis here, everyone has a plan until they got a punch in the mouth. That's the philosopher Mike Tyson says that. This is about my first project doing a book cover for a company in Brazil. I got this feedback from the owner of the company. Bombed with praise and distinction. We need a cover with feminine appeal and sophistication. I deeply hated it. So even though I could have stopped my career of doing book covers at the time, could end like that, this talks a little bit about we need to adapt ourselves to situations. In very long projects, even if with clients of your creative director, most of the time your ideas will be being rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. But this tells more about, dealing with that rejection will tell more about yourself than about other people. It's not that the idea is bad or good. Maybe at that time the client was wrong. Maybe at the time the client was right but was not prepared for your idea. But it talks about how you deal with them. So it's interesting to think about this growth mindset perspective, where it tells us, someone with a growth mindset will have the belief that you can improve in whatever you do through the right training. Values trying hard because already has lots of failures. So the more failures you have, the easier it is to deal with them. But also, the easier is to understand that if you had a failure, you can overcome that because you have the tools to do that. You have the process to do that. You have the workflow to do that. And a parenthesis here, back to what the Gabal guy was talking before, which is how personal projects, I also teach and also do my own freelance projects and also have the day job, how these things relate to each other. And they all influence each other in a positive way by bringing money or by bringing happiness when you are doing a project that you are not that happy at work, but also by teaching you new skills and keeping you inspired to do new things. And the last element that we're going to talk about here is that even though if sometimes things go very wrong, sometimes things go very right. So I had this partnership done in 2016 with, which was to make a witchcraft magazine called Sabah. Sabah, the editor of the magazine, saw a project from my MA, found on Behance, so that's the importance also of being in all the social networks you can be. And then she found that there was this aesthetics of the Gothic that was not being correct with our times. So there was a lot of, if you see Witchcraft magazine in the past, there was a lot of like runic symbols and not matching what you see on Instagram, which was very minimal, modern, which is wearing black and white. So this partnership, I'm not going to talk too much about that. We're just going to show the process for the first cover. The process started a little bit wrong. I had one bad presentation with them, and then after that was a very singular process for all the dishes that we did, a very good partnership. It's one of the projects that I am proudest because there's a lot of me on it as well. So in the beginning, it was very like trying to look at these old archetypes about witchcraft and trying to bring them to modern times, to colors and other elements. And then throughout the process, we were like taking out and taking out and taking out and making it more minimal and more minimal and more minimal and trying things, trying typography that was inspired by the time but was not, the gift didn't stop. But we go to the next one. In the end, the magazine doesn't have anything in the cover. It's just a blank thing. If you look closely, there will be an invisible logo on it. but it's just a thing about like this passing of time. We did 3 magazines, then we did a poster set, then we did a tarot deck. That brings us to the end of this talk. The creative process can be, someone was playing with cards before. This is my way of playing with cards. This is playing with the elements, with the alchemical elements. If you think about normal stages of creative process, understanding, concept, refinement, finalization, you can tie them with this flow that comes from the elements. The element of fire is about insights, is about the magic lamp that comes from this great unconscious around us. The element of water relates to generating ideas, like trying things out. Like the first step is like, well, I actually had an insight, I had a strategic background here about something, I did some research, and I find there's something interesting around this. The element of water is about generating, so it's about creating and creating and creating. It's not being aware of why is it good or bad. This is the next stage. This is the stage of air, where you are saying like this word, like this works, this not works, this idea is good, this idea is bad. And then the last stage is about finalizing it, making it real, like the element of air, like earth, like making it of clay, making this thing real. Why I'm talking about that is because if we don't know in which part of the process you are, you can be frustrated because you may be in a moment where you are trying to generate ideas, but that moment is not about that. That moment is about making the work done. You need to finish it. There is a timeline, there is a deadline, there is budgets, there is all these things that are influencing that. And you can find joy in that. You can find joy in like in the nitty-gritty of the typesetting and the nitty-gritty of like I crafted that logo by the 100 times. And this kind of like helped me throughout my career, because when I was a junior designer, I was always like thinking like, oh, I just like doing like the creative part, like the concept. I like to generate ideas, And then when you start working, you are working with other people's ideas, and it's like, oh my God, like I don't want to be working just with other people's ideas. I want to be generating mine. But you can find pleasures by knowing that at that moment in time, you are the person that needs to craft it. And that moment in time, you are the person that needs to make it happen. So it's just a little trick about witchcraft, another tool for your vocabulary, and that's it, guys. Thank you very much.